Hey, um, the following interview that you are about to see is one that I did with Ron Marz. It was probably about a couple weeks ago because that's been the 80th anniversary of the 80th anniversary of Green Lantern special released, and um, the Dee's kind enough to set up an official interview with him. I know I've talked to him before, but I don't think we ever really covered his work, his run on Green Lantern. So what you're about to see is about a 25-minute interview with him, and it's pretty interesting, and we cover a lot of stuff. So hope you enjoy.
All right, whenever you're ready, Chad, go right ahead. You got about 20 minutes.
Okay. All right, I'm here with Ron Marz. Ron, we've talked multiple times before, but I don't think we've ever really talked about your run on Green Lantern.
I guess not. I blame you for that wholeheartedly.
It's my fault. So I'll have to buy you a beer because of that next time if we ever see each other again.
If I can ever leave my house again, fair enough.
True. When before you started your run on the Green Lantern, what was your history with the character?
Before I took over the book, I read Green Lantern a little bit, but I wasn't a huge faithful Green Lantern fan. Honestly, my familiarity mostly had to with the character, with the look and everything, mostly came from Super Friends when I was a kid. The expanded challenge of the Super Friends version, where you actually got Green Lantern and Flash and the Atom and Hawkman and a few other characters that we basically never saw again. But I sort of loved that Gil Kane costume that Hal had in the comics, in animation and all that. So that was really my exposure to it. And when I was offered the book, it was sort of like, by the way, we'd like you to take over the monthly writing duties on Green Lantern, and here's what's going to happen to Hal Jordan in your first 3 issues.
I was going to say, if they told you that you get to, do a little crazy and then, bring in somebody new.
Yeah, well, the initial storyline for Emerald Twilight was, like a page and a half of notes that I was given by editorial, and they said, here's basically the parameters we want you to work in, and then you make up a new Green Lantern. So in that sense, it was kind of a scary opportunity. There was great risk and great reward to be involved.
So what when you were designing the character of Kyle, were there any things that you brought into the character that you wanted to add to the mythos?
Well, the main thing for me was that if the decision had been made that Hal Jordan wasn't going to be the focal point of the book anymore, that we were going to have a new Green Lantern, I wanted to make a Green Lantern as different from Hal as possible. And I grew up a Marvel kid, frankly. I grew up reading mostly Marvel books, and later on found New Teen Titans and Batman and that kind of stuff. But really, my formative years as a comic reader as a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, was Spider-Man and Avengers and Thor and all that stuff. So I think I naturally gravitated toward a more Marvel-style character, which, in this case, Kyle is very much the everyman archetype that Spider-Man is emblematic of, really. So I've never made any real bones about the fact that the inspiration for Kyle was very much, those classic Peter Parker years of, when John Romita Sr. was drawing the book, and Gil Kane, and all the way up to when I was a teenager reading it. And the whole notion being that you needed to be as concerned about what was going on in the main character's life out of costume as in costume. You know, was Spider-Man going to get a date for Friday night with Mary Jane? Was he going to be able to pay his rent? Was Aunt May in the hospital? Was J. Jonah Jameson going to yell at him this week and not pay him? Like all of that real life complications that were an attraction to me, you know, the soap opera aspect of the story, really. I wanted to make sure that I brought that kind of stuff into the book with Kyle, because I wanted the reader to feel like Kyle was your proxy. He was you with a Green Lantern ring. He wasn't a fearless test pilot. He wasn't a hero before he got the ring. He had to grow into the role. Not that Hal being a test pilot and a hero doesn't work. I mean, it works great, but let's paint with a different color. Let's have a different offering on the buffet table. So I definitely wanted to ground Kyle as much as possible, to make him unlike any of the other lanterns that were already there.
Now, you did get to write Hal a couple of times in Emerald Knights and also in the Fear Itself. Well, let's talk about Fear Itself right now. How is it to write, basically all three generations of Green Lanterns?
It was great. I mean, I that project came to me, and it was digitally painted art. Back in the days before there was digitally painted art, really, by a terrific artist named Brad Parker, who, it took him quite a while to do that hardcover, 120 page or whatever it was graphic novel. But it really turned out pretty amazing. That was one of the first chances I had to sort of write Alan Scott in his prime in the 1940s, and Hal in his prime in what was essentially the 1960s, even though, we couldn't come right out and say, this is 1964 and it's right in the middle of the space race and all that kind of stuff. And then Kyle in his era, it's still one of my favorite projects, because I got to sort of write all of those characters in the eras in which they were created. I got to write them kind of as they were originally intended, which was a real joy. And then to try to string a story together that could span those generations, have a villain that could span those generations. And I look back on it very fondly.
Now, you in itself, you include, there's a brief cameo of Jon Stewart and Guy Gardner. Do you wish you could have kind of played with them a little bit more in that story, or was it just the Alan Scott, Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner story?
It was. I mean, we originally envisioned it as the three, the current, the former, and the original. So in that respect, that was that was the intention. Green Lantern's one of the few superhero franchises that you kind of get to pick your flavor, and I think it has a lot to do with when you discover the franchise, when you discover those characters. It's I've enjoyed writing all of them. In fact, I think actually the way they play off of each other is of great importance to me. The fact that Hal and John and Guy and Kyle are all very different in terms of their personalities, and even Jessica Cruz and Simon Boz, again, very different personalities. I think it shows the flexibility and the elasticity of the franchise, that you can have a number of characters who all basically do the same thing, right? They've all basically got the same power, but they're all interesting in and of themselves. And that's, I think that's actually something that's fairly obvious in the 80th anniversary special that's out this week, of which I have. Where's my copy? See, you actually get to, if you actually get to work on the thing, you get your comps early. So
okay.
So I was able, it was a pleasure for me to be able to page through the whole thing and read all the stories. And I've enjoyed all of these big anniversary issues that DC has done. As a reader, I love those big packages where you get a bunch of different 8 or 10-page stories, and they're really, to me, that's some of what comics does best. But I think the Green Lantern one is really near the top of the pile, because there are so many different stories about so many different Green Lanterns. Obviously, the Batman and Superman versions of this are basically about Batman and Superman with some other characters thrown in. But this one's a real smorgasbord. Everybody gets their moment to shine.
So let's talk about. Can you talk a little bit about your contribution to the 88th anniversary special? Well,
I got invited to the party along with Darrell Banks, who I've worked with once or twice before. My partner in crime on our Green Lantern run for about 7 years, and obviously, the artist that I've probably done the most with in my career in terms of actual pages. And so, a guy I've known for 25 years. I mean, we've known each other since we were kids. So to be able to come back and do another Kyle story with Darrell was just an absolute sheer pleasure. And really, I mean, editorial was very kind in that the instructions were, well, it's an anniversary issue, and it's got to do with the legacy of all the Green Lanterns and everything. So write something about that. That was really the only suggestion in terms of where to go with it, and they kind of let us run with it. So this story is it's a Kyle story set now, and I don't want to spoil too much of it at all, but
sure.
all of the other Green Lanterns kind of get to make an appearance, and the story is called Legacy, so that should give you a sense of how we approached it. And I also have to say that I think this is some of Darrell's best art, period. In the breadth and depth of his career, this is just one of the best looking jobs ever. It's also the first time that Darrell's drawn a Green Lantern story digitally. He used, he did the whole thing digitally instead of old school, pencil on paper. So he pencil and inked it himself. And man, I just think it's another step forward in his career in terms of the kind of work that he's doing. It's just beautiful stuff.
Kind of backtracking a little bit, you got you got a chance to write Halligan and Emerald Knights when after Kyle got thrown back 10 years, after his adventures with the Legion. How was it, writing the contrast of the two characters, for that story?
That was actually a story that I had in mind to tell for a long time, because I really wanted to write. I wanted to write Hal as he was envisioned in his 1960s glory, that the sort of Silver Age, bright, forward-looking version of the character. I honestly have to say I'm a big fan of the space race stuff and the Mercury 7. So that all of that right stuff kind of thing that runs through to me Hal's creation. I mean, Hal is to a great extent Chuck Yeager, one of the great American heroes. So I got my opportunity to write Hal in those early days and in his prime, if you will, and I just enjoyed the hell out of it. And of course, there was also that whole storyline was about Hal sort of discovering what happens to him in the future, and the tragedy aspect of it, and the bittersweet aspect of it. So that's actually a storyline that I'm still very fond of. And I'm told, Darrell Banks, in fact, told me that he got his comp copy of the Green Lantern anniversary hardcover that'll be out, I believe, later in the summer. And issue 100, where Kyle and Hal meet is actually one of the stories in that book. So I was really happy about that. I'm proud of that issue.
So, have you been following what they've been doing with Kyle since you left? I mean, I know you got to come back and write the Ion 12-issue maxi series, and were you kind of worried what was going to happen to Kyle after when Johns was doing his rebirth?
Not worried. I mean, you look. These are not your toys.
Yeah.
You get to come in and play with them for a while, and then you put them back on the shelf, and somebody else takes over. So you like, even though obviously Darrell and I co-created Kyle, he's very much our baby. You also have to be kind of a grown-up about it and realize that somebody else is going to raise your baby at times. That's just the way it works, and that's okay. So it's interesting for me to come back to some of this stuff and just be a reader, just see where his character goes and what happens. I have to say I'm really pleased he's basically back in his original uniform, because I think that's it's rather unique. I mean, it's a different looking uniform than all the other GL costumes. So that's kind of cool, and I think the audience is generally attuned to that costume as well. So I think we're kind of giving the audience what it wants.
So when speaking about his costume, what were you guys thinking when you designed his costume, since it was a large departure from what readers are probably used to?
Sure. Well, again, the idea was that, well, if we're going to go in a different direction, let's go in a different direction. Let's kind of throw caution to the wind and do a completely different kind of Green Lantern costume. So as Darrell has said recently, it was the 90s, so he did a bunch of different costume variations, many of which we're very glad didn't see the light of day. There were probably much bigger shoulder pads than were necessary in a lot of versions. So what we ended up doing was Darrell did a bunch of different designs, and we took like the mask from this one, and the pattern, the suit pattern from this one, and sort of the armored gauntlets and boots from that one, and we took all the pieces that worked from different designs and put them together in one design, and then tweaked them from there. And I still think it's a fairly iconic look. I mean, somewhere over in my file over there, I still have the fax paper of all of the different costumes that Darrell designed, and kind of the ones that we cannibalized to come up with the final uniform.
So looking back on it, are there any parts of this, your tenure with Kyle that you think like maybe I could have done that better, maybe this would have worked out, in a more logical.
There's always stuff you look back at and go, well, I could have done that better. And but you do the best you can when you can do it. You want the next story to always be the best story. You take the lessons that you learned, and really, having gone back and done some more Green Lantern with this anniversary issue, and looking back over some of the previous issues to kind of draw inspiration from for this story. There's always stuff you want to do better, but I'm thankful that I can look back at a lot of that stuff and go, we did okay. I'm very pleased with a lot of the stuff that we did, and I'm very pleased that the audience seems to remember this stuff fondly. And I always get people at conventions and signing stuff like that that tell me Kyle is their Green Lantern, or that they discovered comics because they got pulled in at the beginning of Kyle's run. That stuff's pretty precious. To have that sort of effect on somebody's reading life is pretty amazing, and I'm forever thankful.
Now, did you know that they were going to kind of take a redemption path with Hal once, with Final Night when he, sacrifices himself to reunite the sun. Or, did you have any idea that they were going to use him for 0 Hour to have him try to recreate the DC universe or anything like that?
Well, I actually didn't know about 0 Hour because the editor forgot to tell me. I was actually in the offices and we were talking about what was going to happen in 0 Hour, and then the editor said something, well, when we reveal Hal as the big villain in 0 Hour, and I went, wait, what? What do you mean? And like he looked at me like I had a hole in my head, and he's like, well, Parallax is the big villain in 0 Hour. And I went, you never told me that. So we had to sit down and compare notes and realize that he thought he had told me. He never did. So I was blissfully ignorant of the whole thing. So we had to have a crash course, and this is where 0 Hour is headed, and this is what your Green Lantern Zero issue needs to be.
Yeah.
So look, sometimes that happens. Sometimes something slips through the cracks, and then you have to play catch up. As far as Hal coming back, I mean, you always sort of figure that these stories are all cyclical. Everything that's old is new again at some point. So I think you sort of you do what you can while you're doing it, and then you pass it along to somebody else.
So I guess this will probably be the last question, but would you be, if they asked you, would you go back to Kyle or Green Lantern?
Yeah. I think you never say never. And this particular story was great fun, and I think I always feel like I have more Kyle stories to tell. I've never any time in the past that I've stepped away, I always felt like there were more stories to tell, which I think is good. I think that's actually the right time to step away when you feel like there's a little left in the tank. So yeah, if the opportunity comes up again, would love to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is probably, I keep hearing beeps, so I wonder if that's my sign to wrap it up. But, stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll see you at the Albany Con in November, assuming it's still,
fingers crossed. Everybody wears a mask and everybody stays safe and socially distanced, and and can actually get to their comic shop this week or this weekend and pick up the GL issue. It's something I'm really proud to be a part of.
Well, I just wanted to tell you that I do some list writing for CBR, and I wrote one that's 80 or 10 Green Lantern stories that you should read before you reread before the 80th anniversary, and I chose Emerald Twilight, Fear Itself, Emerald Night. So you're well represented on that list.
Good deal. The check will be in the mail, my friend.
No, they're only on there because they deserve to be on there, at least in my opinion. And so, but it was great catching up with you. I mean, I think the last time we talked was back in March.
We're just at the beginning of the pandemic then. So
maybe we'll have to get the crew back together to see where everybody is.
Anytime you know where to find me. Yep. As always, a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.